Let's talk to Joe Mackie, who's an employment law partner at Burlingtons, because we were going to talk, Joe, about the situation with Huw Edwards. But can I just ask you a quick question about Keir Starmer, if you don't mind? Keir Starmer, it turns out, made £404,000, according to his own figures, last year. He declared that he paid tax of around about £99,000. To my mind, that doesn't sound like he's paid enough tax, because if he's paid, I know there may be a variety of sources of the money. He may have a private company, I don't know. But I know enough about, you know, different types of tax on dividends and all the rest of it, that it's very difficult to earn that kind of money and only pay 25% on it.
Good point. I don't know anything about tax, except I pay too much of it, Mike, to be honest. So it doesn't sound about right to me. It looks about 25%. Doesn't sound good to me.
No.
You know, they say about politicians that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So let's see what happens.
And what about the freebies? Because a lot of people have asked me this question. He's in receipt, by all that we know, that he's declared, in something like £76,000 worth of freebies, including the clothing that he got from Lord Alley, including tickets that he was given for free, including some accommodation that was paid for. Now, again, my understanding of that system is that whenever I was in a company, and if I was employed, I used to have to pay a tax on whatever was considered to be a perk of the job. I think as a self-employed person out of my own company, I would also have to pay tax on any gifts that I received. Isn't that the case?
So MPs are covered somewhere differently in law, and they're not employees. They're independent. So, you know, I've always said about this, they've set the rules and they've set themselves a pretty low bar for what they have to declare. But they do have to declare everything. You remember Mr. Blair had to declare things like his Fender Stratocaster that he was given by a grateful music industry, that kind of thing. Right. You have to declare everything, but they can give you whatever they want. You can have freebies coming out your ears, and I think a lot of people do get an awful lot of gifts. Yes. As long as they declare them, then, you know, they're not supposed to have been taking any favour as a result. But, you know, we'll see about that. Well,
that's nice for them, isn't it? Let's get on to the matter at hand. Huw Edwards, an awful lot of people think, should have gone to jail just the other day because some of the things that he admitted to, the guilty pleas that he pled to, if you like, involved some really horrific child born, some really awful paedophilia. The Sun this morning says that he's only one of many. Dozens and dozens of people walk free every single day from the justice system because there isn't any room to put them in prison. What's the position, would you say, on things like Huw Edwards' money that he's been asked to repay £200,000? As of yet, we think he hasn't done it. Some people have also said his pension should be in some way clipped. What would be the situation there?
So firstly, I agree. All the child pornography and paedophilia is just appalling. It's disgusting. And of course, some people are angry, and I understand that. It doesn't make it any better that it's, excuse me, licence payers' money, so it's public money. But in terms of what the law says, if you're suspended, as he was, on full pay, that's pretty much the norm, because in law, you're still an employee until you're gotten rid of, until you're terminated. Right. So they can stop paying him as soon as the investigation finds he's guilty, which they did, and they dismissed him immediately. The problem is he didn't say, I've done it. He didn't say anything to them. But I think they've got a way to get back at him. If I was advising them, I'd be saying, look, in contract law, in employment law, there's a gross misconduct. If you perform something that is gross misconduct, and this is certainly it, so anything that's dishonest is gross misconduct, but he's right at the end of the line of what it is, then that's something called summary dismissal, which is instant dismissal with no notice, you're out the door. Right. Now, that would be... And with no payoff, presumably, although we don't know. We haven't asked, actually. Well, I haven't asked the BBC, and they haven't volunteered it. I don't know whether he got a payoff. He might have done. I don't know if he got a payoff. I don't know that, but it's common knowledge now that he was paid his full salary until the end of the contract, which is when he was terminated, when he was found guilty. Yeah. So if I was advising him, I'd say, look, the point where you found out that this was alleged that he'd been doing this and suspended him is the point that he should have said, I'm guilty. Yeah. But he just kept silent. That's the point where you know of the gross misconduct. That's the point you summarily dismiss him. So get that portion of the money back. And I think that's lawful. And I think that's something they could do. I think that's what they're trying to get. I think that's what the proportion is.
Right. But yet, when we saw Tim Davie in front of a select committee the other day, he was asked about it, and he said, oh, yes, we have requested it, but so far we haven't had an answer. And when he was asked whether there was a deadline, he said, no, I don't think there is. I mean, it's not exactly very aggressive, is it? I mean, if it was me, I'd be sending him a threatening letter at the very least to say, you know, we want this money back by the end of September or something, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the BBC need to get their act together on this. They just need to get that money back. They should bring a claim against him, should get the money back in the employment tribunal or in in the High Court. It's certainly something that I would be pursuing against him. For one thing, it's bad reputational damage for the BBC. They do need to be seen to be doing something tough.
Well, they've admitted as well that it's actually damaged them. You know, finally they've actually sort of opened their eyes and seen what everybody else sees. But what about the pension? Is there any way that legally any company, whether it's a public company or a private company, can kind of draw back or claw back some pension? Because the people that I talk to are absolutely outraged that he will be in receipt of something like £300,000 a year of a pension. I mean, it's ludicrous, isn't it?
It is, but that's his money that he and his employer have paid all the while that he's been in contract with the BBC, so legally can't touch that. However, again, what you can do, in my argument, is you go back to the point where he was found out, where he was suspended, and you take back the money that was paid from that moment on, because he could have said, yeah, I'm guilty. He knew he was guilty. He didn't. He kept taking the money.
Well, he could have said, at the very least, he could have said even before the police informed the BBC that the charges had been brought, because he must have known that he was facing these charges. He must have known there was a court date. He must have known that he was likely to be found guilty or he was going to plead guilty. So he was less than honest with them at the very least, right?
Absolutely, and you know, the evidence was compelling. All the photos that was found on his phone and on his laptop, it was absolutely compelling. He would have known there was no way around that. He's been reporting on cases like this long enough. He will have known that.
Yeah, absolutely shocking. Jo, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Jo Mackie, employment law partner at Burlingtons there, with her view and her take on the situation with Huw Edwards. Of course he should give the money back. There's no question about that. And of course there should be some ability, surely, for the BBC to somehow at least clip the wings of his pension if they're not going to do away with it altogether. You know, I'm not saying the guy should be living for the rest of his life in penury, but he wouldn't be, because, you know, this is a guy who's been making £500,000 for quite a considerable amount of time, and that's an awful lot of money. But for him to be able to claim £300,000 a year is, quite frankly, an insult to humanity. It's an insult to the British people. It's an insult to the BBC, and it's very definitely an absolute stain on the memory of some of those poor children who were abused so terribly in order for him to seek some kind of instant gratification. Absolutely shocking.